Good evening and welcome. Tonight we bring you a story that comes from the voice of a man who believed he had finally rebuilt his life in a new country. Our guest today is Daniel Hart, and he has shared with us an account that feels almost unreal. What began as a hopeful new start in the vibrant streets of Bangkok twisted into a night he can never forget. This is his personal testimony, told with every detail he remembers. Now join us as we reveal his story with complete honesty and emotional depth. My name is Daniel Hart, and for most of my early 30s, I lived with the feeling that my life was on pause. London had worn me down with its grey skies, rushing crowds, and a loneliness that seeped deeper with every passing month. I remember one evening sitting in my small apartment, staring at a city I no longer felt connected to. Something inside me whispered that if I stayed, I would slowly fade into the sameness of every tired day. That night I booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok, telling myself I needed a place with colour, noise, and a kind of chaos that might jolt my heart back to life. When I arrived, Bangkok greeted me like a living creature breathing hot air and neon light. The moment I stepped out of Suvarnabhumi airport, the humid night wrapped around me, carrying the scent of jasmine, street food, and the distant rumble of traffic. Tuk-tuks darted along the roads, vendors shouted cheerful greetings, and the city pulsed with a rhythm that felt completely new. For the first time in years, I felt awake, truly awake. I moved into a small apartment near the Chao Phraya River. It was nothing luxurious, just a modest room with pale blue walls and a balcony that overlooked a narrow street. Every morning I would wake up to the sound of boats gliding across the water and monks chanting at a nearby temple. I felt like I had stepped into a different chapter of my life, one that was eager to be filled with new experiences, new faces, new emotions. The first weeks passed quickly. I learned the roots of the city, from the crowded alleys of Chinatown to the peaceful courtyards hidden behind old temples. I started working remotely, doing freelance design projects that kept me financially steady. At night, I wandered through markets shimmering with lights and laughter. Street musicians played soft melodies, children ran past me chasing glowing toys, and the smell of grilled seafood drifted through the crowds. Every moment felt like a story waiting to unfold. Yet underneath all my excitement was something else, something quieter, a longing. I did not want just a new city, I wanted connection. I wanted to feel seen again. That was the part of me I tried to ignore, but it lived in every choice I made. Moving across the world had not erased my need for belonging. It had only magnified it. I began taking Thai language classes during the evenings. At first I joined just to integrate better, but soon the class became the highlight of my week. The teacher had a gentle voice, the lessons were always filled with laughter, and the students came from everywhere. An American chef, a French photographer, a Japanese musician. Each of us was there searching for something, though none of us admitted it out loud. It was during one of these classes that I started to understand how deeply Bangkok was changing me. I would walk home afterward through quiet back streets where the city finally softened. Elderly women watered plants in front of their homes, lanterns swung gently from wooden beams. It felt peaceful. It felt safe. For the first time in a long while, I did not rush. I simply breathed. Slowly, the city became more than a place. It became a companion, a witness to the version of myself I was rediscovering. The man who once felt invisible was learning to feel present again. But even the brightest new beginnings cast shadows in the right light. I could not know that the feeling of rebirth I held so close was leading me towards something I could never have predicted. A moment of fragile hope that would soon collide with a reality sharp enough to shatter the life I believed I was building. And while I stood there on my balcony one warm evening, looking at the river glimmering under the soft city glow, I had no idea that the next chapter of my story was already walking toward me. A woman whose smile would capture me from the moment I saw her. A woman who would become the center of my world before pulling it apart in a way I still struggle to understand. This is where my new life began, and where the calm before the storm finally broke. Her name was Marley, and the first time I saw her, it felt as though the world had briefly lowered its volume just to let me notice her. It happened on a Thursday evening, during one of my Thai classes. I had arrived early, hoping to review a few phrases before the session began. The classroom was quiet, the soft whir of the ceiling fan swirling the warm air. I remember flipping through my notebook when the door opened gently and she walked in. She wore a simple white blouse and a long emerald skirt that flowed with every step. Her hair was tied loosely behind her, strands falling around her face in a way that made her look effortless. But it was her eyes that caught me, dark, warm, and steady. She smiled at me before taking a seat 2 rows ahead. It wasn't a flirtatious smile, it felt sincere, curious, almost familiar. Throughout the lesson, I found myself stealing glances, not in a desperate way, but in the quiet hope that maybe she would turn around again. And she did, once, twice, with the same soft smile each time, as if she could sense my thoughts before I had them. When the class ended and everyone gathered their things, I lingered a little, unsure if I should approach her or simply walk out like any other night. She made the choice for me. As I stepped into the hallway, she was waiting. She tilted her head and spoke in careful English, her voice gentle yet confident. "You learn fast. Your pronunciation is good." I laughed awkwardly, surprised. "I think you might be the only person in Bangkok who believes that." She shook her head with a playful expression. "No, you speak with heart. That matters more." That moment felt like the opening line of a story I had been unknowingly writing since the day I arrived. We walked together out of the building, talking about small things at first, how long she had lived in Bangkok, her love for traditional dance, my clumsy attempts at learning Thai street food names. She had an ease to her presence, a way of making silence comfortable rather than heavy. When we reached the street, the city glowed with evening lights, motorbikes humming past and vendors calling out to customers. She glanced up at me and asked if I had eaten yet. I hadn't, and she suggested we grab something nearby. I should have been nervous. Instead, I felt calm, as if this moment was supposed to happen. We ended up sitting at a small food stall near the river, where the owner greeted Marley as if she were family. She ordered for both of us, choosing dishes she said I had to try if I wanted to understand the soul of Bangkok. The food was incredible, spicy enough to make my eyes water, but she laughed and taught me how to balance the heat with sticky rice. We talked for what felt like hours. She told me about her job at a boutique hotel and her dream of opening her own cafe one day. She spoke with passion, her eyes lighting up whenever she mentioned home, family, or the small joys of daily life. I told her about London, about running from a version of myself I didn't want to become. She listened without judgment, her expression softening when I mentioned the loneliness that pushed me to leave. There was a moment, somewhere between our second and third dish, when she looked at me with a seriousness that didn't match the lightness of our conversation. It was as though she wanted to say something important, but chose not to. The pause was brief, barely noticeable, yet it left a faint echo in my mind, a whisper of something hidden behind her kind eyes. When the evening ended, she insisted on walking with me to my apartment street, not in a romantic gesture, but out of simple concern for my safety. Bangkok was lively, but its back streets could be unpredictable at night. At the corner where we parted, she gave me a small nod. "I'm glad we met tonight, Daniel." Her voice felt sincere, yet there was something deeper woven into those words, a hint of guarded emotion, as if she knew that meeting me meant opening a door she wasn't entirely sure she wanted open. I watched her walk away, the glow of the street lamps catching her silhouette, until she turned a corner and disappeared. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of something that would change everything. A connection that felt natural, yet carried a weight I could not see. A bond that would pull me closer to her world, one filled with beauty and warmth, but also shadows that stretched farther than I could imagine. At that moment, all I felt was excitement, curiosity, hope. I had met someone who made Bangkok feel less like a city and more like a place I could finally belong. But the truth lurking beneath our encounter was already taking shape. And soon I would discover how a single meeting could lead to both love and the unraveling of everything I thought was safe. The weeks that followed felt like a slow drift into something warm and comforting. Marley and I met often, sometimes after my Thai class, sometimes during her lunch breaks, and sometimes without planning at all. She had a way of appearing in my life like a gentle breeze, never forcing anything, never rushing, yet somehow always arriving exactly when I needed someone near. We explored the hidden corners of Bangkok together. Tiny cafes tucked behind old wooden doors, temples glowing softly at dusk, floating markets where she showed me how to bargain with a smile instead of a serious face. I learned that she loved old Thai songs and hated cold weather. She learned that I had an embarrassing fear of geckos and a weakness for coconut ice cream. Little details, but each one pulled us closer. Then one evening, something changed. We were sitting by the river, watching the longboats glide through the dark water. The city lights reflected on the surface like scattered gold. She seemed quiet that night, more than usual. Her fingers played with the edge of her bracelet as if her thoughts were somewhere far away. At first, I thought she was tired, but then she asked me a question that felt heavy. "Daniel, do you trust me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet the weight of the words pressed against my chest. I nodded without hesitation, maybe too quickly. She looked at the water for a long moment before speaking again. "Sometimes people come into our lives and bring both happiness and trouble. I do not want to be the reason you face trouble." Her words confused me. There had been no argument, no tension, nothing that suggested danger. I reached out and placed my hand over hers, hoping to reassure her. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. After that night, the signs began to appear, small, almost unnoticeable at first. There were days when she suddenly cancelled our plans with vague excuses, times when she seemed distracted, checking her phone repeatedly, then locking the screen quickly when I looked near. She started glancing behind her in crowded places as if expecting someone. Once, while we walked through a night market, she froze for a moment, staring at a man in a dark shirt. He wasn't looking at us, but she pulled me away with a nervous grip and insisted we take a different street. Whenever I asked what was wrong, she gave gentle answers meant to calm me, not to inform me. "It is nothing, just stress from work. Please do not worry, it will pass. I only need some time." Yet her eyes told a different story, a story of someone carrying a fear quietly, hoping it would simply disappear if she stayed silent. One night she came to my apartment unexpectedly. Her hair was messy from the wind and her breathing was unsteady. When I opened the door, she stepped inside quickly as if seeking shelter. She wrapped her arms around me tightly and whispered, "I am sorry. I should not have come, but I did not know where else to go." I held her, feeling the tremor in her body. I asked her what had happened, but she shook her head. "Not tonight. I only want to feel safe tonight." She fell asleep on my chest, but even in sleep her face was tense, as if her dreams were fighting battles she could not speak about. That night I realized something important. My peaceful new life in Bangkok was slowly becoming entangled in something I did not understand, something hidden behind her careful smiles and quiet moments, something she wanted to protect me from, yet could not completely keep away. I tried to convince myself it was all in my imagination. Perhaps she was just dealing with personal issues. Everyone has their shadows. Everyone has moments they prefer not to explain. But deep inside, I felt an uneasy truth forming. The connection that brought so much light into my life was slowly being surrounded by darkness. And even though I cared for her more with each passing day, I could sense a coming shift, A collision between her world and mine, a collision that would reveal everything she had been trying to hide. The night it happened began quietly, almost peacefully. I remember the air felt cooler than usual, carrying the smell of rain even though the sky was clear. I had spent the day working from a small cafe, answering emails and pretending everything in my life was stable. But Marley had been silent since morning. No calls, no messages, not even the small heart she usually sent before starting her shift. By late evening, worry had sunk its teeth into me. I walked aimlessly through the city, hoping movement would distract my mind. It did not. Every sound, every passing motorbike, every sudden shout from a vendor made me tense, as if the whole city sensed something was coming. When I reached my apartment street, I saw her. She was standing near the entrance, her arms folded tightly around herself. Her clothes were the same ones she wore the last time I saw her, but her face looked different, exhausted, pale, almost frightened. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward and grabbed my hands. "Daniel, listen to me carefully. I need you to stay calm." Her voice trembled despite the strength in her grip. I opened my mouth to ask what was happening, but she shook her head. "Not here. Come inside." Inside my apartment, she locked the door, then checked the window twice. Her breathing was uneven, like she had been running or crying. Maybe both. "Marley, talk to me. What is going on?" She sat down slowly, as if her body could no longer support the weight of whatever she had been carrying. She looked at me, eyes shining with fear. "There is something I should have told you before. Something I tried to keep away from you because I did not want you to be involved." The room seemed to shrink around us. Every second stretched longer than the last. "I have been followed," she said quietly. "Not just once, for weeks." My heart slammed against my ribs. "By who?" She hesitated, lowering her gaze. "Someone from my past, someone I tried to leave behind. He found out about you. That is why I asked if you trusted me. I knew this day might come." I felt a chill slide across my skin. The pieces finally connected. The fear in her eyes, the sudden disappearances, the glances over her shoulder, the night she had come to me trembling. "Marley, you should have told me earlier." She shook her head again. "If I had, you would have left, or worse, tried to protect me and ended up in danger. I thought if I stayed quiet, he would give up." Her voice broke into a whisper. "I was wrong." Before I could respond, 3 heavy knocks echoed through the door, not frantic, not confused, confident, purposeful. Marley shot to her feet, her face draining of colour. "He is here." The knocks came again, louder. I moved toward the door instinctively, but she grabbed my arm with surprising force. "No, do not open it, please." We stood in silence, listening to the world on the other side of that thin wooden barrier. A man's voice followed, calm, too calm. "Marley, I know you are inside, and I know he is with you." Her fingers trembled against my skin. She pulled me back toward the inner room. "We need to leave through the balcony." I felt disbelief flash through me. "What? Marley, this is not a movie. I know, but he is dangerous. I have seen what he can do." Another knock. This time the handle rattled. Marley guided me to the balcony, her movements fast and desperate. The alley behind the building was narrow but empty. A metal ladder led down toward the back exit of a small convenience store. She climbed down first, urging me to follow. Halfway down, the front door of my apartment burst open. I heard male footsteps, heavy, quick, and then a voice full of anger, echoing through the room we had just escaped. I jumped the last steps and landed beside her. She grabbed my hand and started pulling me through the alley as fast as she could. My chest burned from the sudden rush. I didn't look back. I could not bring myself to. We pushed through the back door of the convenience store, startling the young cashier who froze as we hurried past him. The bright fluorescent lights made everything feel more unreal. Marley pulled me toward the front exit, But before we could reach it, she stopped abruptly. "Wait." Her voice was small, terrified. Through the glass across the street, a figure stood under a flickering street lamp, watching, still, waiting, the same man whose footsteps had followed us seconds earlier. Marley squeezed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. Her breath hitched as she whispered, "I am so sorry, Daniel. I never wanted this to touch your life." And at that moment, with the world closing in and the night turning colder around us, I understood something awful. My new life in Bangkok no longer belonged to me. It had been pulled into her past, into the darkness she had tried to escape, into a moment that would mark the end of everything I thought I had finally begun to build. When the man stepped out from beneath the street lamp, everything inside me froze. He didn't move toward us. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply watched, as if letting us know that no matter where we ran, he would always be one step behind. Marley's grip tightened until my fingers went numb. I could feel her shaking, a trembling that came from fear buried so deep it had shaped her entire life long before she ever met me. We slipped out through the rear of the convenience store again, weaving through narrow alleys and side streets until we reached a quiet block near the river. Only when we stopped beneath an old banyan tree did Marley finally collapse onto a bench. Her breathing came in sharp, uneven waves. I sat beside her, trying to steady my own heartbeat, while the distant sounds of the city echoed around us. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He never stops." Her words felt like a blade sliding under my skin. I wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that I would protect her, that this nightmare would end soon. But there was no comfort I could offer that wouldn't be a lie. I had seen the look in that man's eyes. Cold, determined, familiar with fear and control. He wasn't someone who walked away peacefully. For a long time we sat in silence. The river glimmered nearby, carrying reflections of passing boats that drifted slowly under the night sky. Finally, Marley began to speak. Not the gentle, cheerful tone I had known before, but a voice shaped by old wounds. She told me about the relationship she had tried to escape. A man who once seemed kind but slowly revealed a violent possessiveness. A man who believed she belonged to him even after she gathered the courage to leave. She moved into different neighborhoods, changed phone numbers, even stayed with relatives outside the city for a short time. Nothing worked. Each new distance only made him more determined. "I thought I could hide long enough for him to lose interest," she said. "I never imagined he would find me again, and I never imagined you would be pulled into this." Hearing her story felt like swallowing fire, anger, helplessness, fear, all boiling together. I hated that she had faced this alone for so long. I hated that she had tried to carry this weight silently just to keep me safe. And I hated that she felt guilty for something she never caused. We walked along the riverside until we found a taxi willing to drive us across the city. Marley didn't want to return to her home, and I didn't want to risk going back to my apartment. Instead, we found a small guest house near a quiet temple. The room was old but clean, with dim lights and walls painted in soft colours. It felt like a temporary shelter. Nothing more. Marley fell asleep quickly, exhaustion finally overtaking her. I stayed awake beside her, watching the rise and fall of her breath. The reality of everything crashed over me slowly. Just weeks earlier, my life had felt open and full of promise. New city, new hope, new beginning. But now the illusion had shattered, and in its place stood a truth I could not ignore. I had come to Bangkok searching for connection. I found it. I found something real, something honest, something precious. Yet I also stepped into a storm I never saw coming. A storm built from someone else's scars and someone else's obsession. At sunrise, I made a decision. Not because I was brave, but because walking away from her felt impossible. I told Marley we would go to the police, that she would no longer face this alone. She hesitated, tears gathering in her eyes, but she nodded. She understood that running had only given him more power. Standing still might be her only chance to take that power back. The hours that followed were a blur of questions, statements, signatures, and trembling emotions. The police listened carefully, especially after hearing how long she had been followed. They arranged a protective report and promised to increase patrols in the area. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Weeks passed, and slowly the tension began to ease. There were no more sightings, no more knocked doors, no more shadows waiting beneath street lamps. Life did not return to what it was, but it began to move forward in a way that felt possible. Fragile, but possible. One evening, as we stood on a pier watching the sunset turn the river orange, Marley leaned her head against my shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I understood everything she wanted to say simply through the warmth of her presence. That night had changed us both. It broke the illusion of the perfect new beginning I had imagined for myself. But it also revealed a deeper truth. That real connection is not made of easy days or simple stories. It is formed in the moments when fear collides with trust, when two people choose to stand beside each other even when the world turns dark. My new life in Bangkok did fall apart in one night. Yet in that collapse, something more honest emerged. Not a fresh start built on fantasy, but a new beginning carved out of truth, pain, courage, and the hope that even broken pieces can shape something meaningful. And that, more than anything, became the part of my story I will never forget. Daniel Hart left London at a moment in his life when everything felt heavy and motionless. His days passed like identical reflections, each one slightly duller than the last. The city that once excited him had become a grey maze filled with noise but lacking true connection. In a moment of quiet desperation, he booked a one-way flight to Bangkok, hoping the distance would create space for the person he wanted to become. When he arrived, the heat wrapped around him like a living presence. Street vendors called out with cheerful energy, neon signs flickered above crowded alleys, and the river breeze carried scents of spices, smoke, and night-blooming flowers. Daniel felt something inside him wake up. For the first time in years, he sensed possibility rather than constraint. Bangkok became more than a city. It became a promise of renewal. He rented a modest apartment near the Chao Phraya River, where mornings began with chanting from a nearby temple and the soft hum of passing boats. His freelance design work allowed him to settle slowly into the rhythm of his new environment. In the evenings, he wandered through markets glowing with lanterns, tasted food that set his senses alight, and met travelers and locals with stories much more vibrant than the life he had left behind. Yet beneath the surface of this excitement lived a persistent longing. He wanted not only a fresh start, but a genuine connection with another person. It was this desire that led him to enroll in a Thai language course, a decision that would change the direction of his life in ways he could never have predicted. During one of his lessons, Marley entered the classroom and captured Daniel's attention with a simple smile. She carried herself with calm confidence, her voice soft but filled with a sincerity that felt rare. They exchanged polite greetings at first, then short conversations, and soon their interactions became something both naturally comfortable and quietly meaningful. Marley introduced him to hidden parts of Bangkok he never would have discovered on his own. They visited small cafes tucked behind wooden doors, peaceful courtyards far from the noise of the city, and markets full of laughter, steam, and colour. With each shared moment, Daniel felt the walls he had built around himself begin to soften. Marley represented something pure, something grounding, and something that gave him the sense of belonging he had been unable to find even in his hometown. But as their connection deepened, Daniel began noticing small changes in her behaviour. At first, they were subtle, almost easy to ignore. She occasionally cancelled plans without explanation. She grew quiet during certain moments, particularly when her phone vibrated. She often glanced behind her in crowded places as if expecting someone to appear. Once at a night market, she pulled him away suddenly. her expression tense as she looked at a stranger who did not seem aware of them at all. When Daniel asked whether something was wrong, Marley gently assured him everything was fine. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a shadow of worry that contradicted her words. The turning point arrived one night when she showed up at his apartment unexpectedly. She looked exhausted and frightened, her breathing unsteady and her composure fragile. Without offering an explanation, she asked him if he trusted her. When he said yes, she embraced him with a trembling relief he had not seen from her before. That night she slept restlessly beside him, and Daniel realized there was a world of pain and fear she was trying to protect him from. He did not know the details, but he knew the silence was carrying a heavy truth. He sensed that a storm was gathering, one that would soon break open. That moment arrived when someone knocked forcefully on Daniel's door. The knocks were deliberate and confident, not the sound of a lost neighbor. Marley's expression turned pale as she whispered that the man outside was the person she had been running from. Before Daniel could process her words, the doorknob rattled. Marley urged him toward the balcony, insisting they escape through the back of the building. Though it felt surreal, Daniel followed her down the metal ladder. As they made their way through an alley, they heard the door to his apartment being forced open. The situation was no longer a quiet fear hidden behind Marley's eyes. It had become a direct threat that reached his home and shattered everything he believed was safe. They slipped into a convenience store and approached the front exit, but Marley froze when she spotted the man standing across the street. His posture was relaxed, but his focus on them was sharp and cold. He did not need to chase them. His presence alone made clear that he believed Marley still belonged to him. Daniel felt a chill run through his body as he realized how deeply this situation could spiral. They retreated into the city once more, navigating through small alleys until they reached a quiet spot near the river. Under the faint glow of streetlights, Marley broke down and confessed the truth about her past. She described a former partner who had once seemed supportive but became controlling, possessive, and violent. Leaving him had not been simple. He had tracked her through different neighborhoods, followed her from a distance, and tried to reinsert himself into her life using intimidation and fear. She had hoped that by staying silent, by avoiding confrontation, he would eventually grow tired and disappear. Instead, he had become more determined, especially after discovering Daniel's existence. That night defined the collapse of Daniel's imagined new life. He had come to Bangkok seeking peace, only to learn that the woman he cared for was living a reality shaped by someone else's obsession. But despite the fear, Daniel could not bring himself to walk away from her. Seeing Marley vulnerable, exhausted, and apologetic for bringing danger into his life awakened something protective within him. They found a small guest house where they could rest, though neither of them truly slept. As Marley rested uneasily, Daniel spent the night confronting the weight of everything. He realized that the illusion of a calm, perfect new beginning had been fragile from the start. Yet he also understood that connection is not built in the easy moments. It is forged when two lives collide under pressure and reveal truths that cannot be hidden. The next morning, they went to the police. It was not an easy decision, especially for Marley, who feared that involving authorities would escalate the situation. But Daniel insisted she deserved safety and stability. The officers took her statement seriously and documented everything. They promised increased patrols and legal measures to keep her protected. It was not a complete solution, but it was a turning point. Over the following weeks, the threatening presence faded. There were no more sightings of the man, no more knocks on doors, no more shadows lingering near familiar places. During this time, Daniel and Marley rebuilt their sense of normalcy. Their connection, once effortless and light, grew deeper and more intentional. They spent evenings by the river reflecting on what they had survived, and each shared silence felt heavier yet more meaningful. Daniel understood now that his new life in Bangkok would never resemble the simple fantasy he once imagined. Instead, it became a life shaped by resilience, truth, and the willingness to stand beside someone even when the path ahead was uncertain. Marley, once guarded by necessity, began to trust again and allowed space for healing. Together they discovered that even in the aftermath of fear, moments of calm could be reclaimed. Daniel's story serves as a reminder that new beginnings do not erase the past. They intertwine with it, carrying both the brightness of hope and the weight of what came before. His journey in Bangkok began with excitement and curiosity, collapsed in a single night of danger, and finally transformed into something more grounded. In facing the darkness from Marley's past, he found a deeper understanding of courage and connection. Their bond did not grow from the absence of fear, but from the choice to move through it together. And in that difficult, honest space, Daniel discovered a version of his new life that was more complicated, yet far more real than the one he had once imagined.